I'm going to call the meeting to order. It is 7:11 p.m. We do have a quorum. I'd like to start tonight's meeting with just a couple of comments and observations on my part. Tonight essentially continues the Commission's objective assessment of the revised application that's been submitted by Northwestern University and received for discussion at tonight's meeting, and we did get a couple of additional pieces of information here. The Commission's role, for those of you that may be unfamiliar, is preservation review. We consider the contents of each application and any additional information requested and provided. The Commission then applies the standards enumerated in Evanston's Preservation Ordinance in order to determine if the application meets those standards. The application of these standards is really the basis for all of our approval and advisory decisions. We need to, obviously, in every process, ensure that our questions are answered and that we have the information that we need as a commission. And this, in and of itself, ensures that we make fair, informed, and impartial advisory or approval recommendations as appropriate. As commissioners, we really set the tone for this process. Ultimately, this process is not about what else is being said or done or implied or perceived outside of the Commission's actual deliberations regarding this application or any other application. It's really about our prescribed role under the ordinance and fulfilling that. As was noted at our February 10th workshop on the original application, the standards for review of applications for subdivision, re-subdivision, or consolidation apply in the circumstances that we're going to examine tonight. I'll read those in a couple of minutes just for review purposes, but I'd like to turn it over to Lori Pearson, who has some staff recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lori Pearson, Planning and Zoning Administrator. You may have noticed that there is a staff memo in your packet. Since that packet was distributed on Friday, we of course have received some correspondence. Some of that suggested some other approaches might be out there. Frankly, we as staff would like to take some time to look into those other approaches. In addition, there's been some questions about any sort of review process along Sheridan. Some more specifics might be helpful. We also think that we would like to take some more time to look into those specifics and better delineate what that might look like. So therefore, we are changing our recommendation, revising it a bit to suggest that the Commission continue the case to a later meeting.
Any comment regarding that? From any commissioners? Okay. Would someone, I think we should make a motion to, that we are going to table that. Is that, pardon? Oh, okay.
That'll be at the end.
Okay.
That'll be action item at the end.
Action item at the end. Okay, that's fine. We'll take it from there. Just from a process standpoint, under the circumstances, what we're going to do initially is hear from Bonnie Humphrey from Northwestern. The commissioners will ask some questions. We'll take public comment, which will again be 3 minutes per signee. I think, Carlos, you have the sign-up sheets out there. And then again, the commission will talk about have some final thoughts, comments. We'll take care of the agenda items, and then ultimately we'll adjourn. So with that, Bonnie, you want to step on up here?
Bonnie, you need
Is there
the mouse. You can use the mouse. I just need to know this guy. Go up on it. Hold it up to the slideshow. Right there.
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Bonnie Humphrey. I'm the Director of Design and Construction at Northwestern University. Thank you, Chairman Williams and Commissioners, for having this opportunity to further discuss our proposal for a subdivision of our campus east of Sheridan Road. Northwestern has been a part of the Evanston community for 150 years, and as our campus has continued to evolve to serve the needs of the students of today and the future, the purpose of the proposed subdivision is to permit the university's campus to continue to that evolution and to protect those university buildings that have been designated as landmark structures, and to minimize potential conflicts over development and to reduce the burden on city resources involved with the approval process for new campus projects. Just as background information for the Commission and for the audience, the subdivision of property is allowable under the City Code, Title IV, Chapter 11, and our application for subdivision has followed the procedures and requirements outlined therein. State law requires that City Council approve a plot of subdivision before it may be recorded with the Cook County Recorder's Office. Per the code, the subdivision survey plats do not need to show the property's improvements, though the plot of survey submitted to review to determine zoning compliance must show any property improvements. The code requires that a certificate of zoning compliance be obtained through a zoning analysis application. This has been completed, and staff have determined that the proposed subdivision is compliant with the U3 zoning regulations. Plots involving landmark properties and properties within designated historic districts must obtain an advisory review of the Preservation Commission, which is why we are before the Commission this evening. At the previous workshop on February 10th, we presented our campus framework plan that was developed in 2009. This outlines potential campus growth strategies over the next 50 years. We have often been asked by the Preservation Commission in the past about our future plans for campus development. Our campus framework plan has been adopted by the university trustees and has been available on our websites since 2009. We have previously shared with the Commission the framework plan at special meetings similar to this meeting. The university has been very open in sharing the framework plan with the community and will continue to do so as the plan evolves. As a framework plan, the plan provides a framework or armature for future buildings to ensure that we develop in a responsible and sustainable manner, preserving open green space and views of Lake Michigan, encouraging alternative transportation, and minimizing the impacts on parking. The university recognizes that our campus is landlocked and does not plan to grow further into the community west of Sheridan Road. Therefore, it is an imperative that our future growth is thoughtful in our use of available land to ensure that we can meet the emerging needs of the university over the next 50 years. I would like to address some of the comments and observations that were raised by the Commission members at our last workshop meeting. The first one is about landmarks. Oops. So this is our original proposal. This drawing is a map of the campus. The pink buildings are actually Evanston landmarks. The photos are of a variety of buildings across the campus, but it shows you where the landmarks are located. So the existing Evanston landmark buildings on our campus will remain landmarks and subject to Evanston Historic Preservation Commission review and approval process for any alteration. Nothing in the proposed subdivision changes the status of the existing Evanston landmarks on campus. Zoning. The university property east of Sheridan Road is classified as U3 under the City of Evanston zoning code. As such, all development within U3 area must comply with the specified height and setback restrictions. The proposed subdivision does not alter the zoning of the campus and the existing restrictions on the property for future development. All new construction, regardless of lot, will comply with the current zoning. Context. As noted previously, the Northwestern campus has evolved over 150 years into a diverse collection of architectural styles. The campus planning from the earliest foundation of the university has reflected a continual evolution. The early buildings were of no consistent style and reflected the architectural trends of the time in which they were built. No one architectural style has dominated the early campus, and the collection of early buildings include a huge variety of massing, style, and materials, including High Victorian Gothic, University Hall, Venetian Gothic Revival, Annie Mae Swift, vaguely Romanesque, Fisk Hall, Neoclassical, Harris Hall, Italian Renaissance, Lunt, Richardsonian Romanesque, Derwent Observatory, and Prairie School, Swift Hall. These buildings are preserved and coexist together along with newer buildings which reflect current styles. The setback and building height restrictions of the current U3 zoning will ensure that all new buildings respect the street wall referred to by the Commission during the workshop. We have included these drawings here to show you the variety of buildings along Sheridan Road. And as you can see, there's a huge variety of massing, height, architectural style, and materials all along Sheridan Road. Stewardship. As a steward of the university's campus, we have an obligation to the Northwestern community to balance the preservation of our history, the enhancement of natural and built environment, sustainability, and fiscal responsibility. The university is committed to the preservation of significant historic buildings and has made substantial investments in the renovation and restoration of both our historic landmark and non-landmark buildings. Our excellent stewardship has been recognized by the Evanston Historic Preservation Commission through the numerous past awards presented by the commissioners. Swift Hall landmark status. Based upon comments raised at our recent workshop, Northwestern has revised the proposed subdivision, parcel lot 4, to incorporate the 1945 and 1949 annexes to Swift Hall in the same parcel as the original Swift Hall building. Oops. So this is the historic George Mayer building, and this is the 1945 annex and the 1949 annex. So this is what was originally submitted, and there was questions about the location and the shape of this lot and the exclusion of the two annexes. So we've revised, this is our revised subdivision application. So we have revised the lot lines to incorporate both annexes and to make a, include more green area in front of Swift in that parcel as well. Harris Hall lot line. Based upon comments raised during the workshop concerning the space between Harris Hall and the proposed lot line to the east, we have revised the proposed Lot 5 subdivision between Harris Hall and West Fairchild to provide a larger side yard to Harris, which is right here. We straighten that out compared to the previous where we had angled this lot line. So future buildings. As part of the university's community engagement efforts, we are happy to share plans in the future for new buildings in Lot 1, located along Sheridan Road, with the Commission for information. Any new building project located in Lot 1 of the proposed subdivision and within 200 feet of Sheridan Road will be shared with Preservation Commission for information during the project's design phase. So there was some question about 200 feet. There was a lot of discussion at our last meeting about Fairchild and Fairchild East and West and protecting those. Those are these two buildings right here. Just for reference, from Sheridan Road to the backside of Fairchild is 140 feet. So 200 feet takes you to the fire lane. But in response to the concerns to preserve those structures, that was how we came up with the 200 feet. Subsequent to my letter to the Commission on February 25, city staff have recommended that the definition of projects in Lot 1 be expanded to include demolitions and major alterations within that 200 feet of Sheridan Road. We are willing to submit to staff's recommendation and agree to this inclusion in the overall subdivision approval. We've carefully reviewed the standards for review of subdivision under 2-8-12, and as outlined in my previous letter and workshop presentation, we believe that the application meets these standards. So in conclusion, we've made significant changes to the proposed subdivision to reflect input and advice of the Preservation Commission, and have committed to share with the Commission future designs for new buildings along with demolitions and major alterations within Lot 1 along Sheridan Road within 200 feet. We firmly believe that the proposed revised subdivision satisfies all the standards for review of application for subdivisions and is consistent with the development of the campus, the existing relationships between landmark buildings and other buildings. We request that the Preservation Commission recommend to the City Council that the proposed subdivision be approved. And in light of comments earlier this evening, we certainly welcome the staff's recommendation for a continuance. Thank you.
At this point, I'm going to go ahead and just for the record read the standards into the record so that everyone hears them again. As Bonnie referenced, it is Section 2-8-12, Review of Applications for Subdivision, Re-subdivision, or Consolidation. Section A, prior to review of any subdivision, re-subdivision, or consolidation pursuant to Title IV, Chapter 11 subdivision, Sections 1 through 3, any landmark area, property, structure, or site in a district council or its duly authorized committee shall request a report by the Commission regarding the effect of the proposed subdivision, re-subdivision, or consolidation on the landmark or district. Review by the Commission shall be advisory. Section B, the Commission shall review the application for subdivision, re-subdivision, or consolidation based on the following standards. 1, the design of the subdivision, re-subdivision, or consolidation shall A, preserve, adaptively use, or otherwise protect the landmark area, property, structure, site, or object in the district, and B, provide the location and design of new structures and objects that are visually compatible within the landmark or areas, properties, structures, sites, and objects in the district, and C, not result in blocking or otherwise obstructing, as viewed from a public street or public way, the critical features of the landmark or area, property, structure, site, or object in the district, and D, preserve and protect the critical features of the streetscape associated with the landmark or area, property, structure, site, or object in the district, and E, not adversely affect traffic patterns, municipal services, adjacent property values, or the general harmony of the district. 2, alteration, construction, demolition, and relocation shall be consistent with Section 2-8-9. Part C, within 35 days of the request of the report by council or its duly authorized committee pursuant to subsection 2-A-12A, the Commission shall prepare written findings and by majority vote issue to the council or its duly authorized committee a recommendation on the suitability of creating the proposed subdivision, re-subdivision, or consolidation. Based on the recommendations received by council or its duly authorized committee, council shall consider whether the proposed subdivision, re-subdivision, or consolidation is consistent with the standards provided in subsection 2-8-12B. E, if council finds that the proposed subdivision, re-subdivision, or consolidation is not consistent with the standards provided in subsection 2-8-12B, the council may deny the application for subdivision, re-subdivision, or consolidation. One point, Lori, when we talk about a continuation, I think from a date standpoint, Gary and I were talking briefly, we need to observe that 35 days, and I assume that is from the revised submission or revised application date, so we'll have to check on that. With that, I'd like to open it up to the commissioners' questions, if someone would like to start. Julie?
Thanks. So Bonnie, thanks for sharing where the 200-foot setback came from. I'm still wondering the 200-foot setback along the eastern area of Sheridan Road. How does that relate to anything? Where it cuts off? I mean, it looks like it's just somewhere. Is it any? Okay, so you come
Eastern Sheridan Road. So this is 140 feet, so 200 takes you to, there's a fire lane right here.
but just like keep traveling along Sheridan Road, and it just sort
Sheridan
of
Road actually turns here.
yeah. No, I mean, along the main portion of the subdivision.
The northern,
Yes.
so the 200 feet is like to the backside of Ford, so it goes
Right.
across here. This is already governed by historic
Right.
preservation.
So-
This is already governed by.
So does that seems sort of random? Can you
Well, it's not
tell
really.
us a little more?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I was looking at Fairchild because there was a lot of discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I know Jack mentioned concern about protecting Fairchild, and it would include all of that. And, certainly it's fairly, it would include anything that we have right now going along Sheridan Road. I mean, I think Jacobs Center is already here. We're not tearing that down.
Right. So it's okay. I mean, it just it could be anything observable from the public way.
No, I think we would object to that because you could say anything is observable and from some angle all the way out to Michigan, Well, and the commission has also previously used the argument that they view Lake Michigan as the public right-of-way, and so anything visible from Lake Michigan.
And I had one other question. Do you have anything in mind for what a protocol might be to include preservation in a discussion of what goes on in Lot 1 if this subdivision does happen? I mean, as opposed to just sharing information, would there be some other protocol? Would we just, it seems to me a little vague, like what would that really mean?
Yeah, and I think that's, with the continuance, we can have further discussions with city staff regarding how that would be handled.
I said I was asking if there was a protocol for how information would be shared with preservation in regards to whatever was going to go out in Lot 1.
Other questions?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that. I have a few other things to talk about, but I'll bring that up since that's where we are right now. I'm going to refer to the staff's recommendation regarding Standard C, not result in blocking or otherwise obstructing as viewed from a public street, blah, blah, blah. Staff doesn't think that's a problem. Future structures aren't presented. How do we know what's next? The memo suggests that to implement informational review, the ordinance could be amended to allow Preservation Commission's feedback on future development within 200 feet from the property line on Sheridan Road. What is 200 feet? And you've suggested it's behind Fairchild, which is a very narrow line along the east-west boundary of Sheridan and the north-south boundary of Sheridan. We need to see that 200 feet affects the view from a public way. Deering Library is at least 500 feet from Sheridan Road and can easily be seen from Sheridan Road. Consider the view north from Sheridan Road as it turns west, and that would be the view of Fairchild. Why should any structure on the Northwestern campus be exempted from that view? We need to see a large-scale plan of the proposed re-subdivided campus to understand what is exactly the appropriate distance from Sheridan Road. My feeling is that 200 feet is less than a stone's throw from Sheridan Road. We can see, the public can see way far into the campus beyond 200 feet. And I feel that the 200 feet is way too short a distance.
At our previous workshop, there was a lot of discussion by the commissioners about the street wall. Certainly, the street wall is within that 200-foot zone. If you want to look at buildings deep within our campus, you could see them obviously from Lake Michigan, which you've interpreted as being a public right-of-way. So therefore, we feel that the street wall is really within the first 200 feet, because that was the comment that was discussed at our last workshop. And I also will point out that obviously nothing will be built in front of Deering Library without having to come to historic preservation, because that's on a lot of record with historic structures.
I just want a clarification either from staff or from you, Bonnie. The feedback that you received from the commission is not binding, correct? Within the 200 feet? Correct, okay.
We have not yet, as I said, one of the reasons we are requesting a continuance is in order to better define what that could look like.
As it exists now, I'm just trying to clarify that 200 feet, 500 feet, halfway across the lake, there's nothing binding about our review as it's presented in the memo.
As it's presented in the memo, that's correct.
Okay.
Speaking of the staff memo or the Northwestern?
I'm assuming they agree with each other, but I'm talking about the staff memo, item 2 on the recommendations.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman.
Yes. Did you have another question, Chair?
Yeah, I had asked staff to provide us with a copy of full-size drawings of the plans that were given to us originally. There are 2 sheets. As I understand it, they were 24 by 36, where the outlines of the various lots were shown in dotted red lines. It's important, I think, for us to see where exactly 200 feet and 400 feet exist on that plan, and I think it's really important for us to see that as a document for us to make a decision.
That's one of the reasons why we want to, or have asked the Commission to continue the meeting, because there's a lot of questions that in the short period of time we have the request, we could not comply.
Can I ask one more question or clarification regarding the memo? On page 4, about in the middle of the page, there's a statement. I'll just read the whole sentence, so, and then I'll ask my question. During the workshop, commission members expressed concern the subdivision might prevent the future designation of landmark buildings on Lot 1. Future landmark designations on buildings on Lot 1 per the existing preservation ordinance could apply to the building only rather than also the lot of record. Aren't landmark buildings required to have a lot of record associated with them?
obviously every structure is within a lot of record. The ordinance says that a landmark designation would include the lateral record unless otherwise indicated on the ordinance.
So I guess my concern with that would be if a building on the campus were to be landmarked in the future, there's nothing really from a location of adjoining buildings and things like that. There's really nothing providing protection of that building, it would seem, if there isn't a lot that is associated with that. I
think it will be protected because if it's designated a landmark, then it's under the purview of the commission.
the building itself, but I guess
Yes.
this, yeah, it seems to provide a gray area in my mind as to, you know, views of the building from the public way, for instance, and things like that. Could another building be placed in front of it if we have no right to review the lot that it sits on, would be my question. Does it make more sense to require a re-subdivision request at the time when the landmark occurs?
Well, that's one of the dilemmas, thing that Northwestern we have to deal with, because if, in theory, any building within Lot 1, as proposed, were to be designated, that, and without that provision in place, then the entire Lot 1 becomes a landmark, lateral record as well.
Yeah, I think it creates that problem again, which is what we brought up before. So I'm not of the opinion that this recommendation resolves that. I think it to the betterment of the landmark building.
May I ask a question to that content? If the lot is not included in that, we're talking about in the future, we don't actually have an example yet. And I know it would be difficult, but could the building, once it's landmarked and it's not associated with a lot, it could actually be relocated? Is that true? And it would not lose its landmark status, but it no longer would be in the context that it was?
We do have standards for relocation in the ordinance, which will maintain the landmark status of the building.
But it would no longer be where it was at the
If
time
it's
of the
relocated,
landmark.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, because it's no longer associated with a lot.
Right. Keep in mind that relocation of landmark buildings is another alternative to structures that otherwise would be demolished.
I think you've had a chance to review the correspondence we've received from Southeast Evanston Landmarks Illinois Center. One of the questions I'd like to ask of you, and this may be something that you come back to us with, we've talked a lot about the quality of some of these buildings, the future value of some of these buildings. Is this something internally that's been part of the conversation about the subdivision? What would be your tack if a property out here were to be nominated or recommended for nomination? How would you handle that?
We actually haven't had any discussions about that, so I hesitate to make any comment at this time.
I think as we continue this, I think that's an important question, because we'll struggle with it on how it affects our ordinance. And I think, as we said last time, and Fairchild, I think we talked about that building having some value, and more in terms of, well, what if it goes away and maybe it's okay. But I think there's a bigger question there, how you guys would propose to address something like that would help us in our considerations as well. Also to that, in the Landmarks Illinois letter that I think we just received a couple of days ago, but it had made a recommendation that a survey be performed on the campus to identify any potential landmarks at this time. Is that something that that Northwestern would be willing to consider as part of this process?
We actually just got their letter this afternoon, so we haven't really had time to thoroughly review it.
Tim or Carl, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Humphrey. Your letter under the section for future new buildings, and I'll just read this. It says, although we have no plans for new construction at this time, and I was wondering if you could elaborate there. How far out does that include? Is that as the date of the letter? Is that a year? Is it within 50 years of your framework plan? That would help us.
Okay. We're always working on plans for renovations and expansions across the campus. Currently, there are a couple projects that we're in the early stages of. One of them is an addition to the Lakefront Athletics facility, which was announced in 2012. So there was a public announcement back then. We are still in the early design stages for that. And we're looking, there's a number of other things we're looking at. We're looking at a renovation of Norris, which is the student union, which is out here, which is not on a lot of record. Neither is the athletics facility. That's not on a lot of record that has historic buildings. But we continue to look at projects across campus, and a lot of them are renovations. Those opportunities, certainly anything that would be on a lot of record with historic structures would be under your purview. And as indicated in our letter, anything within 200 feet of Sheridan Road, we would be bringing to you as well. And the framework plan does outline what we call 50 years worth of growth. That was when we did the framework plan, we looked historically at the campus and how fast we grew. And from a historic perspective, we grow about 700,000 square feet per decade. And so when we did the 50-year plan, we assumed that we'd be growing at that rate as well. And so that was our target, was to accommodate that much growth over 50 years.
May I ask you a question, Bonnie?
Sure.
And maybe you've answered it and I just didn't understand the answer. What does share mean? What does it mean when you say you're happy to share plans? And you use it twice in the new paragraph. And by the way, the portion that you were reading about no future plans was in the prior letter and not in the new letter. But twice you say, will be shared with the Preservation Committee. We'll be happy to share plans in the future. I'm trying to understand what the word share means operationally. Is that, here are our plans, we'd like you to look at them, here are our plans, we'd like you to review them, not necessarily binding or non-binding. What exactly do you mean when you say share?
Well, certainly we mean sharing plans that's a non-binding review. I think as far as the process, we need to work with city staff on outlining how that process would work. And certainly, given a continuance, I think we could work a little bit closer. And in discussions with city staff to outline how that process would actually work.
Lori, do you want to comment on that?
No, I was just going to point that same thing out. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Just as a small point of clarification, when you mentioned the athletic facility, as the lot is currently subdivided, there's a dogleg that extends all the way out to the lake along Lincoln, which is public way. And the conversation that surrounded the lakefront and the lake view, actually, with Mr. Naylor, we discussed that as well. That lakefront center would extend on to the lot of record and would therefore be part of the purview of this commission. And it's principally
not in the
viewable.
current design.
Well, the one that we've seen before. So I think that's part of the consideration that this commission is looking at. Currently, Lincoln and that particular site were of interest to us as that development was being discussed. So in the broader scheme of things, we're thinking about that kind of long-term development. So I think Tim's question was, what's imminent? That's imminent, and as of today, that in a way is part of this conversation.
Right, but Gary, I think what Ron Naylor shared with you years ago, the design has changed since that time, and so it no longer goes on that portion of the property that would be under purview.
Great, thank you.
Madam Chairman?
Yes. Jack?
Tonight our decision has to be based on the applicable standards for review. Those standards apply to all property owners who live in historic districts in Evanston. To quote from Gary Auerbach's February 8th letter to our commission, why does the university believe that it should live by its own rules? Is there an alternative to what all of us in the preservation or historical districts are required to do? That's one. The other one is from Sheila Sullivan, who's the president of Southeast Evanston Neighbors. Lakeshore Historic District residents are required to seek permission from the city if they want to redo windows, replace fences, or make other visible structural changes. Why? Because of changes to non-landmarked properties affect the character of the quality of the district. Changes to non-landmark structures and new construction on campus affect city streetscapes and the character of the neighborhood surrounding the university. So the basic concept is everyone else in Evanston has to adhere to these standards. Why do you feel you are excluded from them?
I'd like to clarify that we are not in a historic district. What you're referencing are historic districts.
Other questions? Scott?
Yeah, I just had one more. One of the other recommendations from the staff memo was Lot 4 encompassed the area south of the existing parking lot. It's the parking lot between lots 3 and 4 that are divided. There was some discussion about, I believe, ownership of that parking lot before. I wasn't quite clear on that at the last meeting. Is there a reason why lots 3 and 4 aren't combined?
Well, staff wouldn't have an opinion.
No,
on that,
it's a
thank you.
question. Bonnie, I'm sorry, that's a question for Northwestern. I believe there was some question about ownership.
Yeah, it's Garrett.
The cul-de-sac is the city street, but the Northwestern does own the parking lot, correct, between the two?
This parking lot is owned by Northwestern.
Okay.
And in our long-term framework plan, we'd like to put that parking below grade.
Okay.
That's part of our framework.
And it does, the only reason I bring up the combination of lots 3 and 4 is that I'm not sure it's not named on the plan, but the building at the end of Garrett Place is a landmark building, which, the parking lot, you want to put it below grade. The possibility exists of you building on the parking lot, and it would obstruct that building from the public way being Sheridan. So I guess I asked the question, is it a possibility of combining lots 3 and 4 so that what happens at that parking lot in front of that building becomes under review by the commission?
I'm trying to understand. Which building are you referring to? That's a landmark?
Well, if you go to the end of Garrett Place, there's a building. It's not named like the other ones are. Yeah. I'm not sure what that is.
Well, that parcel that it's on has historic properties, so it would
Right.
that would
Right, directly in front, but you would be obscuring, if the parking lot is kept out of the lot of record, there would be the possibility of obscuring those buildings from the public way if a new building in the future were planned for that area. And with the 200-foot not being binding, I guess I make the request or take the consideration of combining lots 3 and 4. I know you can't answer that right now, but I'm just for the record, making that request to review that.
Yeah, we had talked a
Actually,
little
I'm sorry,
bit last time.
Are you concerned about? I'm sorry. Are you concerned about this parking lot here in front of Garrett?
I think it's.
Part of lot.
Yeah.
Bonnie,
and
can
I
you
think
go to that close-up you have of the
I think
land hall,
I
the
think
slide
the-
that has a close-up?
Yeah, I think the other thing, Scott, was last time
Doesn't
we
have
had
that picture.
talked about the possibility of squaring that one off.
Right, and it is in
So-
staff recommendations. I'm just bringing up an additional request to review that, because
This-
I think
yeah.
that parking lot leaves open
Yeah.
a lot that's,
Yeah, actually, this parking lot here is on, although the university owns the property, it's leased to Garrett.
the one that's in the lot 3, or the one that's outside of lot 3?
Yeah, the Garrett lease is, well, actually, I think the Garrett lease line is
Scott,
here.
here's a.
Yeah,
here's
I'm
the-
not sure. I don't know if I have that good of
But
aim
Scott,
from
are you
way back.
concerned about this little bump out right here?
This portion of it right here is in lot 3. I understand that, but it's this whole area,
Right.
basically between this line and this. I'm concerned that views from Sheridan Road to these buildings would be obstructed if property was built here on the parking lot here.
Lori, I guess I'll direct it to Lori. I'm reading the recommendation. Can you explain, there was a recommendation of shifting that lot line, or the one from 4. Where was it? I'll use my gizmo.
I think part of that came from the discussion from the commission, which did talk
Right.
about squaring
But
it
I
off.
couldn't quite follow what you were recommending. That's all I'm asking. I don't know if you.
It's not reflected, I don't think, in this plan.
No.
That's correct.
But I'm asking what the recommendation was given this plan. Do you want mine? Oh, she's got one too.
Yeah.
The staff recommendation in the memo was to square it off a bit more there.
And still leave that strip, and still leave that strip of parking and roadway in between. Okay.
We were trying to reflect better some of the discussion at commission.
And just for reference, this little bump out here on Garrett,
Yeah,
it's just like a one-story little mechanical room.
okay.
It's not part of the majestic structure that
Okay.
is the chapel.
Yeah. I still
There's a
think,
dumpster next
I
to
still
it.
think the possibility exists for,
Yeah.
it
Well,
is
and-
open space across there, and the possibility exists for obstructing it. I appreciate the fact that you want to put the parking lot below. I think that's great. But my worry is what you want to put on top of it
Right.
once it's below grade.
Well-
So and again,
Sure.
just as we continue to develop this, just take a look to review that.
And the framework plan actually keeps this an open roadway, even though the framework
Okay.
plan puts parking below grade.
Okay, great.
But that's always a main access. And if you look at the framework plan, we also tried to preserve those views out towards the lake as you enter campus. So that's an important principle of the framework.
So I guess I would point out then, combining those two lots and including the parking lot, I don't believe, although you would have to come in for review, I don't believe, there would be many issues with keeping it open space and keeping it, a roadway, pedestrian way through there, an access, so.
Yeah.
It's just, again,
Another piece, I don't know if you're aware that Garrett actually installed a geothermal field under the parking lot. So this area is probably off limits for
doing
foreseeable
anything,
future
huh?
because of
Yeah.
the geothermal field that's underneath it.
Bonnie, just for our reference again, show us, this map is too pretty. I want to see some actual dimensionable images here, but show us where 200 feet lies on that particular piece of property.
Okay. Well, certainly, I think we can work with staff to get you.
I want to see on this map where, just give me a red light where that
So
200 feet goes.
This is 140 feet to the back of Fairchild, so 200 feet goes to Crow Hall here. This is already under your jurisdiction in this proposal. Jacobs is not going anywhere. This is under your jurisdiction. And so 200 feet goes behind Ford, which is right here, so it
Right.
goes across here.
Right.
So all of this is tied up by historic preservation with historic landmarks. Tech is not.
So what I'm getting at is 200 feet is not a whole lot when you look at that site. In terms of view from the public way.
Well, I think it's a little unfair because it's a huge parcel of land, and it's the largest parcel of land in all of Evanston. 200 feet certainly is more than enough to protect the concerns of a street wall, which was the concern that was voiced at our last meeting by the commissioners.
Just as, Bonnie, as a point of reference, What, do you have a sense of what the depth is of Lot 2 to the north, right at the corner there of Lincoln and Sheridan? What the dimensions are. I was looking at something that perhaps could provide us a reference point.
I know that's close to the 200 feet.
Do you want me to give it?
Yeah, go ahead, Carlos.
I don't want to pretend this is exact science, but from our system GIS, I use the scale tool, and it's about that area, 200 feet, just west of this property line here that is in red. So it's within that area.
So the dorms are included?
Well, the dorms are kind of halfway. It's halfway the line there we might be. And again, it's just approximation.
Yeah. And if I just might clarify, so the 200 feet, all that we're looking at, you're already along Sheridan Road. This is under your purview. Tech is not going anywhere, I can tell you that much. Not in the next 50 years.
That's already covered.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just this lot here, parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
Jacob Center is not going anywhere. And it's Fairchild. And I was responding to your concern that Fairchild was an important building that you wanted to reserve or, potentially look at anything that happened to it. So it includes that.
Well, may I ask a question here?
I was going to.
Oh, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead,
Gary
Gary.
was going to. Go ahead.
I didn't see it.
I think thank you. The references to Fairchild and the location of that, it makes sense to me now where that came from. I think I was one of the ones who spoke about trying to combine those two lots, and I think I'd like to think you're making the argument for me. But if they've just put a geothermal system under that parking lot, and your future plans are to bury parking in that area, that's a long-range issue. I think we would certainly revisit a subdivision if that changed. I think this whole 200-foot limit would go away along Sheridan Road, at least the concern about the depth, if you would combine 3 and 4. Don't leave a gap between them, include the parking lot, just connect all of those. And the reason I think I suggest is you also mentioned that by moving this lot line around, you've exposed that building. One of the points of our discussion tonight, and one of the standards that we have to apply, is whether or not the view is obstructed. The way that lot still doglegs, Swift would be obstructed by a building that this commission would have no purview over. The standards don't say anywhere that you can't obstruct a view. It just says that it has to be done thoughtfully and it has to be done within the standards. So I would encourage you to look again at simply merging 3 and 4 seamlessly. No gap between, no roadway. If it's always going to be a parking lot for the next 50 years, then I don't see how that's of great concern. In the 200-foot line we've been talking about is less of an issue there because, again, Tech is there and Kellogg is there. And then that gives us the continuity of that street wall remaining within our purview for as long as it takes for them to exhaust the geothermal field, and then we have a conversation about a larger, different building on that lot.
Any final questions? Additional questions?
One other consideration that might help here. We've talked a lot about context, which you addressed and continued to help us understand architectural styles and some of your history. One thing here with the 200-foot provision, an idea might be to include a certain distance from any landmarked lot that would come before commission. Any changes, say within 50 feet of anywhere, along that landmarked lot, that would help us ensure that context is protected and that to Gary's point that he just made. And that would be, I think, a great step towards extending that stewardship that you talk about, working with the city and working with this commission. So I appreciate that consideration.
I will point out that zoning, this is all U3 zoning, and it has required setbacks and space between buildings. So that, I assume, was
Sure.
designed by, when the zoning was written, in consideration of providing ample space between buildings.
Right. Well, and that's good because you'll already be coming before zoning, for that. So in this case, it would just be ensuring that the university wasn't going to put up 5 feet from a landmark building isn't going to put up a neon, siding to an existing building that's not landmarked. Does that make sense?
That wouldn't come to zoning if they had the right distance.
With the right distance, yeah.
Right, but that's the context I think that we've been talking about, and it's not to prevent the university from growing or doing anything special. It's really just to ensure that the context is preserved. We've been talking a lot about streetscape, street view, Lake Michigan. None of that really applies, but that does fall under the commission when we talk about residential buildings that are along Lake Michigan. That's public way as well, but I don't think that's really pertinent here. But we are talking about context, so that might really help if you were to include, say, 50 feet or something within or from any landmarked lot line. Thank you.
Jack?
I assume you've read the letter from Bonnie McDonald from Landmarks, Illinois. She suggests an alternative would be to make the historic campus area a special district of some type. And who's controlling this image up here? If we could go back to the site plan, which I don't like because it's not at all specific. Yeah, that one. It's pretty. Look at Tech. Tech is at the east side, probably 400 to 600 feet back from Sheridan Road. The north lot, what's it called? Lot 1, Lot 2, where the gym is. Lot 2 is roughly, and Carlos said it's roughly 200 feet. It's actually about 250 feet. You draw that line across the east side of Sheridan. You draw the line across the north-south part of Sheridan that includes dorms. 200 feet isn't a whole lot. I suggest that a line approximately 400 to 500 feet setback from the west and northbound Sheridan Road might be appropriate as a special district that would fall under the Commission's building review. So that would set aside all the lots that you've identified and a little more, and it would go actually a little north to include Kresge on the south side of the campus, and all of the other buildings that you have included or not included in your proposed subdivision. I think that special district would solve the whole problem.
Jack, I think that's one of the things that staff really wants to take a look at in terms of what the viable alternatives may be there, because I think in addition to the suggestion that Landmarks has in their letter, there are other models out there that I'm sure they want to take a look at as well. So that's part of the whole continuance issue. So I think that's something they'll be looking at and discussing with the university as we move forward.
Well, thank you, because I do feel that 200 feet is just literally, we can all throw a stone 200 feet, and so that's not a whole lot compared to the scale of the plan that we're looking at here.
I'm not sure everybody could throw the stone 200 feet, Jack, but
maybe you can, Jack, okay, but the rest of us not so much.
Might reject that. But, Jack's proposal, is, you realize that you're proposing a line right about here. Which is their current offer. Yeah. And then, I guess, heading that way. So, in looking at it, and I'm not necessarily saying I'm for it or against it, the only buildings that would end up not having been encompassed before is Tech, and this one of my favorites. You've noted that, and that's about it. Maybe it doesn't have to be the same distance here. So, how many more buildings are actually being included that are not included in what you're proposing? There's really only, one, two, this unknown piece of land here, and a few others. Okay. But the question becomes, how different is it? I'm not saying that 400 is the magic number either.
Yeah. Did you have a specific question?
Well, I'm asking is, how different is it in terms of how much does it really affect what you're proposing? I think whether it's Jack's 400, 200, it's not going to matter. But if I ran that line, whether that is the line of the existing or not, it doesn't seem to really put that many additional buildings or sites that aren't already being incorporated in this series of little duchies or whatever we want to call them.
I think that when it comes to all of these things that we've brought up in terms of the depths, in terms of the configuration, I think that, again, getting back to the continuation issue, that's just something that we're going to have to see what happens in the upcoming conversations between staff and Northwestern. But I think everybody's provided some good input in terms of, how they're viewing the map and viewing the revisions that were submitted in the last week or so. Any final questions, Jack?
Yeah, I'm sorry. One other final comment. The 400 feet, if you look at you have an elevation of your campus viewing north from Sheridan Road that includes the dorms. But directly behind the dorms is Kresge, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the building that's immediately in front of Kresge.
Fairchild.
No, Fairchild of the dorms. Then there's a tall building, a fairly contemporary building. Crow Hall.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Crow Hall. Go to the next slide. Okay. No, is that it? No, that's north-south. That's north-south elevation. Give me the.
Yeah.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. So the very horizontal band that you see just to the left of center is Crow Hall. So the public view from Hinman, and thank you for acknowledging that comment that I made, because that gateway is really important at Hinman. You see the dorms in the foreground, low 2-3 stories, and you see Crow, and directly behind it, Crow is Kresge, which I think is a pretty important aspect of that streetscape. So that would be included in the 400-foot setback. Otherwise, if it's 200 feet, it doesn't make the grade.
Okay. Any final questions? We got one more here, and then we need to go to public comment. Okay. Do we have the list, Carlos, the sign-up sheet?
Okay, thank you.
Two. Great.
Thank you.
Okay. The first person that signed up is Richard Weiland, and you have 3 minutes, Mr. Weiland.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, a number of the points that I'm going to make in my remarks have been made already tonight, but I want to reiterate them by way of supporting the process that's going on. The Southeast Evanston Association, of which I'm vice president, my name is, by the way, Richard Weiland, 1012 Hinman Avenue. The Southeast Evanston Association, SEA, urges the Preservation Commission and city staff to further negotiate with Northwestern University on its proposal to subdivide the East Campus before the Commission recommends to the City Council that it approve the proposal. For over 50 years, SEA has served as a watchdog and advocate for the residents of Southeast Evanston, playing an integral role in our community by creating coalitions, engaging elected officials, working for both constructive change and prudent preservation, and speaking out on behalf of our members and the citizens of our city. The updated proposal in this evening's packet is a considerable improvement over Northwestern's original proposal, but still falls short of what we believe to be acceptable, even if city staff's current set of conditions are incorporated. We make 3 observations. First, many of the city's standards for review of applications for subdivisions reference protecting and preserving the landmark or area, property, structure, site, or object. Northwestern's response to these standards continues to refer almost exclusively to landmark properties and their very immediate surroundings, with very little consideration of the areas, properties, structure, sites, or objects that form the context of these landmarks. Second, city staff's recommendation regarding Standard B notes that Northwestern's framework plan does not provide enough information, particularly about the design of new structures. However, under this recommendation, the Commission would have no role regarding areas outside lots with landmark buildings other than to provide feedback to Northwestern. Feedback is not oversight, and in its current form, this recommendation includes no obligation for Northwestern to pay any attention to the Commission's feedback. Third, city staff's recommendation regarding Standard C discusses preventing the obstruction of views of landmark buildings only from the perspective of Sheridan Road. Sheridan Road is clearly important, but it's not the only public road on the East Campus. For example, Lincoln Street is the northern boundary of the area under consideration, and Garrett Place is in the middle. We believe that these other public roads should be given the same consideration as Sheridan Road. Finally, we continue to wonder why Northwestern feels it needs the relief it proposes, unless it has the intention of doing construction, alteration, or demolition that would not otherwise pass the Preservation Commission scrutiny. Members of the Commission have already stated that from the Commission's perspective,
You have 10 seconds.
the work to review and approve Northwestern's project is not burdensome. Thank you for your service to the City of Evanston and for your good work.
Thank you. Next is Barbara Janes. Oh, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Janes. I live at 802 Colfax in the Northeast Evanston Historic District. Hence, whatever I do to the outside of my house, I have to present to you. And I would second Mr. Weiland's comment that why should, and many of yours, why should Northwestern be exempt when it contains so many historic buildings, and what do they have? And if you give up your right to review and decide upon whether a project goes forward and in what form, and that could be a precedent. You know, there's all kinds of T1 in the historic district across the street. You know, what's that going to portend for the future? So I would urge you not to give up any of your authority over these kinds of decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who hasn't signed up that was, yes, could you come forward and state your name and address, please?
My name is Kathleen Hammerschlag. I live at 311 Lake Street in the Lakeshore Historic District. Mm-hmm. This issue was alluded to earlier, but I'd like to come back to it. As Ms. Humphrey stated, in 2012, the Board of Trustees voted to build a multi-purpose facility on Lake Michigan that would benefit several of the athletic teams. In March 2014, it was reported in the Tribune that donations had poured in and that construction of the two-building complex would begin by early 2015 and take 2 years to complete. The rendering published a year ago shows the indoor playing field bordering the beach. It is unclear where the other one, tall and massive, is supposed to be built. A design competition was even held, and Perkins and Will was hired a year ago. I'd like to know the status of the project and when these plans will be shared. Thank you.
Just to clarify, there was no design competition. We did engage Perkins and Will in the planning and design for an addition to the lakefront athletic facility. We're still in the early stages of that, and depending on fundraising, the project will not be going forward until significant funds have been raised in order to proceed with the project. But we're still in the planning stages, so I can't say much more about that at this time.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I think we were going to figure out what we plan to do next here. If there's any final comments from anyone. Any final observations? You want to make a motion?
Well, do you want to talk about some dates for?
Yeah, we may want to do that. No? Okay.
We're still working out some details on dates.
Oh, okay. Great. Thank you, Lori.
With that in mind, I would like to propose a motion that we continue this meeting pending some staff discussions and further revisions to this application, with no objection from the applicant. And
is there a
that
second?
motion stands.
I second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. No no's, no abstentions. Were there any final comments? Otherwise, we can have a motion to adjourn.
We're not setting a meeting date until.
No,
such
we're
time.
not. We're not. Who would like to move to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Scott, Elliot, you want to second it?
Second.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you all for coming.